Thank you, Chair. Recognizes himself for 5 minutes. I'm annoyed by this constant reference to the fact that it's Congress and only Congress that can authorize breaching of the dams, because I take that as a red herring, probably the wrong word in this hearing. But the point of the matter is there is a memo floating about which I had opportunity to look at before we held our hearing up in June. And the memo was utilized and is being utilized in the litigation that led to this mediation document. The memo suggests that if Judge Simon so desires, he can operationally reduce the pools behind the dam, reduce the ability to generate power, reduce the ability to use the river for navigation. And that would not be an act of Congress, would it? And so it irks me that there's this constant repetition of the fact that everything's fine because Congress will have to act, when in point of fact, there's already memos floating about that suggest that the dams can be basically prevented from operating through judicial fiat. So really, is it what I see when I saw the mediation, the so-called secret document, and someone else leaked it, we didn't. And when I saw it, I thought, well, this is merely a means of creating a framework so when the judge does choose to operate, and I hope he doesn't, in that fashion, there's things in place to try to dampen the unfortunate effects of such a thing. But I'm going to set that aside and go back to the healthy and abundant standard, because I find that so amazing. It's not in the leaked document, is it? It's in the document that was cranked out just a few months after NIMS had found that there was no jeopardy. And then suddenly we see this document that rebuilding interior Columbia Basin salmon and steelhead to healthy and abundant levels. And as Chairman Cornish-Rogers pointed out, that has no business in this particular litigation. But my real question to you, Mr. Sims, is who pays? Who pays to reestablish these runs to a level probably not seen in the last couple hundred years, given the nature of the fish? Please put up the chart that has the fish runs in it. But the point is, who pays? Isn't it the ratepayers of the Northwest that are now going to be saddled with the burden of bringing these fish back to these healthy and abundant levels? Is that correct?
It's certainly our concern that it could be the default, again, as I've said before, that when appropriations are not outlined, when agencies don't step up for budgets, and we clearly did not see any of that in the documents that were made public, that very often Bonneville and its ratepayers are put on the hook for all of those costs.
Yeah, but this cost is this is what we would call a progressive goal to achieve healthy and abundant. It's not certainly to avoid jeopardy.
That's right.
So what is going on? It's kind of a means of imposing an obligation upon the people of the Northwest to pay millions, if not billions, to reach healthy and abundant. What's going on with that?
Congressman, it's an unachievable standard, and it's not a defined standard, I think, as Neil from PNWA outlined earlier. It's one in which it's an aspirational and not at all rooted in the ESA.
And forgive me for interrupting, but you also use the phrase BPA induced to acquire some of the electricity that's going to be generated by these green sources that would be paid for under the so-called mediation agreement. Induced to acquire. Now, I know there's a law that suggests that the power needs to be purchased from tribes in certain situations. Right. But this document goes quite a bit further than that. Can you share your thoughts?
Sure, absolutely, yes. As I said in my written and oral testimony, basically the induced to acquire and the replacement resource label seems very highly inappropriate, given that the Northwest Power Act clearly defines Bonneville's acquisition authority for additional resources. There are many hoops that Bonneville must go through and many processes that it must go through in order to acquire energy. My belief, having looked at the document, is it's very muddy and walks right up to the edge and will potentially harness a future administrator or the current administrator to have to look myopically at one source.
Right, and let me forgive me, but I need to go to Ms. Falcon for just a moment. You mentioned in our pre-hearing discussion that the lack of certainty was already creating difficulties in how you're representing your ratepayers. Can you share your thoughts?
Yes, when we have, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. When we have uncertainty on our power supply, that has downstream implications to how we're going to create our tariffs for our customers. If the proposed rate increase is anywhere from 5% to 50%, our wholesale power supply makes up 50% of our total budget. And so if that's making up 50% of our budget, then we need to pass on those direct costs to our ratepayers. And it creates an untenable uncertainty for us, sir.
And I'm going to have to stop you there, and I want to share all of it. We have to go vote, but I have to read a few things in before we can run out the door. But I want to thank all of you for your testimony. I truly want to thank you for traveling here, and of course, the members for the